Hey friends, this is Miss Jennifer from the Stark Museum of Art. Today we're going to be talking about Home Is, the 2021 Juried Student Art Exhibition, and we're going to dive into the theme for this year. So let's get started. Before we dive into the theme, though, I want to make sure I share a few important details for our 2021 Juried Student Art Exhibition here at the Stark Museum of Art. The exhibition of student artwork will be juried by staff here at the Stark Museum of Art. It'll include up to 100 works created by 4th through 12th grade artists in Region 5 Texas and Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana. If you've participated in the past, we've changed those grade levels, so be sure entering or currently in 4th grade as the youngest student can participate. Artwork that is selected for the exhibition will be displayed in the museum's community art gallery and featured in an online exhibition. And then, of course, the Juried Student Art Exhibition will accompany our special exhibit here at the Stark Museum of Art, The West is Home, which will be on view April 23rd through October 16th of 2021. Now, our 2021 theme is Home Is. And what we're asking is students to do an artwork depicting an image inspired by his or her interpretation of the word home. Now, before we dig deep into what that could look like, I want to take a look at the definition of home. Home can be defined a number of ways. It can be considered one's place of residence, so where you currently live. It can be a social unit formed by a family living together. So you living with your parents, or maybe you live with your grandparents or an aunt and uncle or a friend. It could be a familiar or usual setting. Maybe you feel at home in school, or you feel at home on the football field. Or home can be a place of origin. So if you aren't originally from Texas or from Louisiana, home may be where you come from. Now, when we think about how we could create a work of art about home, I wanted to pull up some examples from the collection here at the museum because our artists have done that before. Now, I do want to caution that these artists were not specifically posed this challenge, but I think we can look at these works from this lens. So the first question I want us to consider is there a certain landscape that feels like home? So think about your outside surroundings. Is there something that's important to you about that? Are you from a mountainous area? Do you live near the water? Are there specific trees or plants? Two examples I pulled from the collection. One, Julian Onderdonk's Late Afternoon in the Bluebonnets seemed appropriate as we think about many of us will be from Texas, and the bluebonnet is our state flower, so that might be something that you think of. But also I thought about personally, I'm from Alabama originally and grew up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. So this pastel drawing by Joseph DiGiorgio, the California series number 7388 Mountains, really kind of reminds me of what that felt like growing up surrounded by mountains. Now, another angle to look at this will be is from whose home will you highlight in your artwork? I've given you two examples, and for one way to think about this is whose home? Is it your home or is it an animal's home? Here we see the Republican or cliff swallow by John James Audubon, and we see multiple birds as well as their habitat here. Another way to think of this would be an outside view of your home, or maybe your house you've grown up in. Maybe it's a grandparent or a family member's house, somewhere that you feel home. And we'll see that with the Nikolai Fashions Adobe house painting. Now notice this painting has a lot of painterly qualities to it. We see lots of brush strokes, and there's lots of energy. So while it's realistic, it's still kind of starting to venture into that abstract area. We could turn that idea of home into kind of interior spaces and think about what interior space reminds you of home. Now, I definitely think of home being gathered around the table. So perhaps John Young Hunter's house dining room speaks to you. Here we have a dramatically lit scene, this table kind of glowing, those dishes sparkling in the background. It's easy to imagine that somebody would gather around this table shortly for a meal. And then we have kind of a casual, almost pedestrian scene with Victor Higgins' Adobe doorway. Literally, this is kind of washed in the same light. We kind of stumbled upon just an everyday view of this room, but it has an interesting composition to it. So definitely can make us consider about the idea of home. Now we've talked about physical place, But maybe there's an activity or a hobby that you feel most at home. I know I've heard students over the years say, I'm most at home on the football field, or I'm most at home when I'm painting or dancing on stage. Here we see two very different ideas of that. The first, we see Walter Ufer's painting Fantasies. This is actually a self-portrait of the artist Walter Ufer, and we can see him holding his paint palette and brush. There's a canvas on an easel nearby. And in fact, we know that this was his studio, and that woman sitting in the background was his wife. So definitely giving us an idea of where he might feel at home. On the opposite side of this, we have a painting by William Herbert Dunton. In this painting, Judas Spurs answered him, and the bit brought him about whirling, bucking as only a devil-hearted horse knows how to buck. Really gives us an idea of perhaps maybe an activity that she would be feeling confident and at home in. Certainly she has seems to have control of the situation, though we're not sure what quite might happen yet. So things for you to consider as you think about where you feel at home. Another thought would be to consider who are the people who shape your idea of home. This question brings us to a couple of ideas. One by E.L. Blumenschein with Ourselves and Taos Neighbors. This painting is a group portrait, including a self-portrait of the artist. We can see him in the foreground in a bright red sweater, but also he's surrounded by colleagues and friends. And in fact, he even included his dog Floppy in this portrait. So this really gives us an idea of a home, and definitely something we could consider. Now, on the opposite side of this, we see a photogravure by Edward S. Curtis. This is called A Hopi Mother. And definitely, I think people might consider the idea of who was important in your household, or who is someone who is a prominent figure. And certainly, we see that connection between child and mother here in this 20th century photogravure. Now, I think your hardest challenge is going to be choosing what to make for this year's exhibition. I think probably the two biggest questions you're going to face is how will you define home? So to kind of summarize some of your options, you could do the landscape around where you live. You could do the house that you live in, an item you closely connect with at home. Maybe there's a specific item. The people you live with, maybe a place where you feel most yourself, the people you feel most yourself with, or even a feeling you associate with home. Now, that might be a more abstract work than what I've shown you here today, and that's okay. Now, one thing to remember about our Juried Student Art Exhibition is that all artwork must be two-dimensional, no deeper than 1/4 inch, and no bigger than 9 inches by 12 inches. So something else to consider is, what are you going to make your art with? We get lots of entries with pencil, colored pencil, pen and ink, watercolor, acrylic paint, tempera paint. If you use oil paint, make sure that that paint has dried. Mixed media, or other two-dimensional media. In the previous years, we started to see more textile art submissions, so that might be something for you to consider. Before we wrap up today, I want to give you a few important dates. Your artwork must be at the Stark Museum of Art by Wednesday, February 3rd at 5 p.m. We're going to announce the artists, the featured artists, and award winners for the exhibition no later than March 3rd. If your teacher submits your entries for you, we'll notify your teacher. If not, or you're anxious to find out, be visiting starkmuseum.org for all the latest information. All artworks that submitted that meet our requirements of submission will be scanned and featured in a digital exhibit. And that'll be displayed both in the museum and online at starkmuseum.org, as well as through a number of our social media platforms. Due to COVID-19, no juried art reception is going to be held in 2021. We will deliver your awards directly to your teachers to distribute to you. And then lastly, all artwork that is submitted for our exhibition must be picked up at the museum between May 19th and 22nd. So make sure you remember those dates and jot them down. I'm sure your teacher will help you remember. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and considering what your entry might look like for this year's Juried Student Art Exhibition. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to have your teacher reach out to me either by phone or email, and I look forward to seeing your entry.